Well, we just heard everyone make a case for the incubator. Also heard some real concerns about the shortcomings of the existing incubators, largely vacancies, funding, access to capital. How do we overcome that if we arguendo decide that an incubator is desirable here? How are those things overcome? And I will pose that question also reflecting on other existing incubators around the state and the community partnerships that they have to make them successful to the extent that you can consider them successful. I'll point to AB Tech. You did cite large vacancies there, Doug. AB Tech, the factory space it is in, was donated by BASF when BASF left Asheville. Okay, there's a big leg up for that incubator to the extent you can consider it successful. Otherwise, around the state, there is much community partnership, particularly between local universities and community colleges. How might that play in here if we need to overcome the obstacles that you all raised?
Well, I have no doubt that if you start an incubator here, it starts with space. There's no doubt about it. It starts with space. In case of, as you said, AB Tech, you've got a massive building that was donated. The Novak Center, that's a massive building. We don't want, obviously you don't want a massive building here, but with any building comes expenses and utilities and all the stuff that goes with the upkeep of a building. One of the keys to success for any incubator, from very small to very large, is one or two or three what they call anchor tenants. If you can get someone in there who is stable, ongoing, and provides a monthly source of income to the establishment per se, that goes a long way. And as small as, and that's as true as small as the Burger Incubator Kitchen. Burger Incubator Kitchen, they have a great anchor tenant in it now. They didn't, prior to, obviously when we started up. But if the Burger Incubator Kitchen did not have a great anchor tenant, then that would be sitting empty. And every month there's expenses, and there's this, and there's that. So if you build it, the question is, if you build it, will they come? Because if you build it and they don't come, someone has a big monthly bill to be responsible for. So, but I have no doubt that if there was one here in downtown, or just off in downtown, that Faith Community College would be involved, at least a small business center. And as I've said to Stan, you fill up that center, I'll be there as often as I have to be to help your tenants. Score's offices are at the News Bus Center in that area. Score worked very closely with the Tech and their office. I could see if we had incubator systems down here, Score moving its offices in there. I could guaranteed I could be there one day a week. UNCW's Entrepreneurship Center somehow, some way would certainly want to be there. So I think the local resources.
They committed to lunch.
So but you have I mean, if you had a facility that combined, put the SBA guy in there, put the Score office in there, put an office for someone like Jonathan and I to go in there one day a week or 2 or 3 days a month. That'll work. But you got to have someone there. You got to have someone there to utilize our services.
So, I guess we're sort of going in this proper order here. But I think, Doug, you did a phenomenal job earlier. And how many of you knew about all the different incubator spaces that Doug sort of went through? I'm sure not everyone was even aware of all of those. So you're probably more dragging, kicking, screaming down the discussion already now to what is an incubator going to look like. And if I heard earlier correctly, we already have 4 or 5 incubators in existence with empty space. And don't forget, guys, this is Wilmington. in place. We have existing incubators that are somewhat empty, and we're in a fairly small town. We do have entrepreneurs, we have small business, we believe in a lot of these things. But put those two things together, and you're pulling me kicking and screaming down this idea of an incubator for those two reasons. Now, there's some interesting things that, the other thing I like to look at too is, you know, some of the things we do with the Entrepreneurship Center, back to this idea of high growth, is look for creative ways to help companies grow. And there are people like Rich and what they do with advice and knowledge and creating collaborative boards that meet once a month, where you get that collaborative value taking place. And you guys meet at one of their business offices, right?
Absolutely.
Right, so they don't even need, you guys don't even need your own space to have those meetings. At the Entrepreneurship Center, for all of you who are interested in our events, which thank you, Rich, for mentioning those, you can go to uncwec.org. Our next event on October 25th is called the Rocket Pitch event. And this event was started in 2009. This is we do it twice a year. And what we do is I go out and identify 5 high-growth companies here in southeastern North Carolina. And when we first started this out, it was almost like a fun thing we're going to do. We're going to have these 5 companies present their cool business ideas. And because I happen to know a lot of people in the investment community, I begged them and offered them wine and beer to come to the event. And they came. And they were blown away by the presentations and the companies that they had no idea existed here. Has anyone heard of Carolina Electric Boat? Designed an electric fishing boat. Not too far from here, one of the fastest Business Week's fastest 500 growing companies in the country. Homeinsurance.com. Anyone now familiar with them? Were they 88, I think, 500? You're in Wilmington. When you think about DigiEffect, or Boyne Space's anchor tenants, when I think of all the companies, there's a company, Tooth Fairies. Anyone went to the Rocket Pitch in April? We had a company with about Tooth Fairies. You know how much money they raised? $1.3 million. So my point is with these rocket pitches, is the companies that have pitched, we have had 25 companies present, we have 5 more coming up at the end of October. Those events now attract investors from Atlanta, Greensboro, Raleigh, to come to those events, $5.3 million. Now that's a direct result, but in part from those, relationships and giving those companies an opportunity to pitch has gone into those companies that continue to grow in this region. So, why am I rambling on about that and trying to talk about how big the Entrepreneurship Center is? Because I think there's ways to do things, and the last thing I'll say about Incubator before moving on is there's a concept called an accelerator. And that to me is sort of what I think the future of incubators are. Focused on high growth entrepreneurship. I see some people smiling, so maybe that name resonates, or some people frowning because they're like, oh my gosh. The idea of an accelerator is you bring in a company that applies and you give them capital, because every high growth company is going to need capital early on. So you put capital in, you take an equity stake, and they have 6 months to prove themselves. Over those 6 months, you help them, give them everything they need, resource-wise, talent-wise, whatever. At the end of the 6 months, if they're doing well, you might put in more money. If not, you might continue to help them grow. If they're not doing well, they're out. Accelerators are starting to sort of take off. For anyone who knows Jumpstart, that started in Cleveland. It's sort of a sexy thing at the moment. Cleveland, Ohio, so I moved to Detroit. West Coast, surprisingly, Silicon Valley area. Accelerators are taking off. Those are very interesting concepts. That, to me, is interesting for Wilmington for a few reasons. One, because those things attract entrepreneurs from other places in the country. Because if we want to grow our entrepreneurial community, we've got stuff here, but we need more stuff to come in here to grow. An accelerator can help bring those in. It gives companies what they need to grow fast and grow quickly, which is knowledge, money. And the point of it is, we get a stake in the business, whoever the investors are, and the company has to stay here and incorporate here as it grows. So, an accelerator to me is a little more interesting. And I'll shut up. And let Rich take it.
He plugged the Entrepreneurial Center. He sure it is good. With all these obstacles, I still think there's a need for an incubator. But it's probably not brick and mortar. But when we look at companies to invest in, what do you think the first thing we evaluate? Is it the product? Is it their financing? Is it their marketing? No, it's the person who's come up with the idea, and we evaluate that. That is number one. And I think we probably need a champion. Somebody who says, I want to be the champion to this concept of having resources to help young and older people who want to start a business and to pull together all these organizations in Wilmington together and define what they do best, because not everybody's doing the same thing. But if there was one champion and this became the focal point, there is the entrepreneurial school, there's the rocket pitch, there's these accelerators. There are people meeting now on an accelerator in this town to raise enough money to have this competition, which would put UNCW, okay, in Wilmington, really, but on the face, people would be, in New York would be saying, whoa, Silicon Valley would go, wow. People at GE would say, why is GE here? Because of the natural resources to get the people here. But I think pulling all these things together so that if there is a young man or woman or an older person who wants to start a business, they can say, here are 10 organizations that can help us. And the people who are in those organizations are committed to really extending themselves. To start a business is tough. It is really tough. And they need all the support in the world. Is it Tom?
Yeah. Rich, what about the other side of it? People that have moved here or investors that have come here, could you attract them and say, and I'll just take 36 of those people, and those persons would go to the incubator and be a physical, intellectual resource for the entrepreneur?
That's what Larry Clark and his team and Skip Jones and Bruce Gibson have done with the Cameron Executive Network. They've reached out into the retirement community, and not all retirees, by the way, people who are actively involved, and they are mentors at the university. And it's a viable program. People commit to maybe, I think it's an hour every other week to meet with students to help them prepare for the world of work. The same concept could be done with an incubator. But you need that champion or that somebody who's going to say, I'm going to make it happen, because there are a lot of people with talent. And I'll put a plug in for Conception Micro Engine Fund. It's going to be a member-managed fund. And all the private equity people say, you're crazy, don't do this. But we're doing it this way, and we have lowered our share price to get more people involved to create a noise around entrepreneurship. And we want people to invest who have an interest in entrepreneurship. So that could be a group at some point where some people say, no, we're going to spin off, we'll do something like this. That will go once a week, or it can't be once a week. You got to be there. You got to be there and make a real commitment to help